Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Arif, and I'm one of the partners at SRJ. And I've got my CPAs here, and I also have got my MTACS as well. Alongside me, I've got Shayan Rashid, who's one of the founding partners of SRJ. And today we're going to be talking about grants and incentives that are available to Canadian businesses from our federal and provincial governments. So just going through the agenda really quick here, we're going to be talking about incentives that are available. We'll specifically talk about SR&ED and what that looks like. We'll also briefly touch on some of the loan programs that are also available, which are sometimes tied to some of these grants and incentives, but not necessarily. And then just to close off, we'll cover some of the changes that have come about recently in terms of tax optimization and how they apply to entrepreneurs. So let's go ahead and dive in. Shine, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Arif. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. This is a topic that we've been really discussing with a lot of our clients and our colleagues. There's been a huge grant, the loan programs, and our goal in this last year was really to see what we could do as a firm, as a company, to take advantage of more programs outside of COVID. We got used to some of that free government money, and really a lot of businesses were able to use it as a catalyst for growth. Generally for all businesses, if you don't understand the numbers, you don't know where you're going, and we want to make sure that everyone has that financial literacy to get to that next level, but then also uses those numbers to understand how they can take advantage of the government programs that are out there to help help push that growth and that being a catalyst for their success. So when we look at the strategic opportunities around tax planning and around government incentives, we as a firm had a goal to get 200K from either shred R&D work and grants, and we reached that last year, and it could be a significant number for many companies, and people don't realize in some instances how easy it is to get these grants if you're set up correctly or be eligible for the tax incentives. And it's a big industry and a big opportunity for a lot of innovative companies, high growth companies, startup companies. Even if you don't have, let's say, a built out product or a service offering, you can use this in your roadmap to help build that out. One example I love to give, or a case study, is from one of our clients who are in the stationery brand space, and they basically created a brand of pens and inks that are sold across the globe. And in that process, they were looking to design some new pens and combine materials to create some new innovative products that aren't in the market. And generally, we wouldn't think that applies for R&D tax credits, but that process itself allows us to qualify for a segment of R&D, the research and development, where there's potentially an issue of that we're trying to solve, but we don't know how we're going to solve it, and we go through a process of trial and error. And just because they were going through that process and they were trying to figure out this issue and they were putting money into it and they didn't know what the outcome was going to be, that actually could qualify for R&D in Canada. So it's not just for tech companies, the R&D programs, the grants available, the tax incentives. It's not just for, let's say, medical companies or research companies. There are a lot of options where we can apply the R&D grants, and that client of ours, they got about, they're in the process of getting back about $400,000. So it's significant for any small to medium-sized businesses. There's a lot that we can look at. There's a lot that is available. So it's just about knowing what programs are out there and what we can take advantage of. All right, let's jump to the next slide. All right, so in terms of the types of funding, we bucket them into these 5 different categories. And the first one would be R&D and I'd say this is also related to innovation. So innovation tax credits, innovation grants, a lot of opportunities there. That's the bulk of it. And for high growth companies, it's fantastic. We have some of the best R&D tax programs in the world. Not just in, the U.S. has some pretty good programs, but we're by far one of the most interesting countries when it comes to R&D tax credits. Then we can look at grants for training. If you want to train up your team and you're looking at options of how to fund that, there's some interesting options there. Very, very strong options there as well. Hiring, if you're looking for new hires, if you're looking for youth hires, newcomer hires, there are some pretty significant opportunities throughout the year. And then there are expansion grants. So if you're looking to take your product or your company to a new market, whether it's in North America or the US or overseas, there are various grant and expansion programs available. And then loan programs. So some of these would be, so we're just looking at different types of funding. So it could be funding related to, let's say, acquire a building or machinery. It could be funding related to expansion and covering, let's say, some purchase orders. So there are many strong programs available. So we want to make everyone aware of those as well. And a ton of options, a ton of opportunities. So let's jump into it. We'll go through some of the specific ones. So Arif, I think you're going to take over on this one, or is this me?
No, carry on. Next one.
Okay. Okay. So the biggest option for expansion grants would be the CanExport program. This program is very popular, especially this past year. They got a ton of applicants, a lot more rejections than usual because I think the actual number of people applying was up by 50% or so. And it's generally a grant of about $50,000, which the government will cover about 50% of the cost. So you spend $100,000, your company spends $100K in order to expand. Let's say we've looked at the US and it's broken up into different regions within the US. And the grant can cover marketing costs, market expansion, intelligence, travel, trade shows. It's very broad in terms of the types of expenses it covers. And so as long as you have 100K revenue, you can get reimbursement of 50,000 of your 100,000 of expenses. Now, for first-time companies who are applying for the grant, they may not get the full 50K. They may get denied. They may not feel like it's a strong case. But definitely, it's an option. And if you have solid documentation, then it's a really good program for trying to expand and not having to pay all of that cash up front from your own pocket. The next program is if you have significant purchase orders or a business outside of Canada and you're going into a new market, the Economic Development Corporation, EDC, they have a very amazing program where they will basically fund your receivables for export companies. So it's a really interesting program. It's not a grant, but it does allow you to get some of that cash up front and really minimize the risk of going to a new market where you're not sure in terms of the relationships. But the government really wants to support entrepreneurs and companies expanding outside of the Canadian region. All right. We'll move on to the next topic. Arif, I think this one you're a specialist on, so I'll let you take this one over.
I'll jump in. Okay, sounds good. So just changing gears a little bit and talking about training. So obviously, as companies grow, there's a lot of focus on trying to upskill your employees. And while a lot of the can happen internally. There's also this ask for external training or requirement sometimes for external training. So, probably one of the most popular grants is this Canada Ontario Job Grant, and it can provide up to 15K per person that an employer is training. There are a couple of caveats for this. Number one, there is a requirement that the employer also contribute part of the cost. So about 1/6 of the cost has to be borne by the employer. And then in addition to this, there's also a requirement for an increase in the employee's wage, which is generally not a challenge because those increases are happening anyway as employees are growing or being promoted. So this tends to be a really popular one. If you're looking to upskill your employees, it's really good for that. For that. The other part that's important to note is that it does require that you're working with a third party to train your employees.
I think one other important factor we should touch on most of these grants is that it's Canadian employees, Canadian contractors. They don't want us hiring people in other countries. They're trying to promote the expenses staying within Canada. So you can't hire your cousins in various parts of the world. You got to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, someone in a similar vein, talking about hiring. So, there are several hiring grants available. At a very high level, the focus of these grants tends to be youth or people that are pursuing higher education beyond an undergrad. So, to dive in, we can talk about MITACS. So MITACS is a grant that's available up to about $7,500 if you're looking to hire master's or PhD students, and it's usually 4 to 6 month working terms. And so this is a specific program. You have to work through the program to hire an individual that might be going through one of those programs. Another one is the Canada Summer Jobs, which provides hourly reimbursement up to about 50% for 12-week terms. One that's obviously very popular and one that most people are aware of is the co-op tax credit. So if there is an educational institution that's accredited for co-op tax credits and you're hiring co-ops from that institution, you can access $3,000 per term per student. So that tends to be very popular as well. The other programs that are on here, so there's a lot of youth employment programs. As I mentioned before, a lot of the focus does tend to be on youth. So when we're saying youth, a lot of these programs are looking at folks that are under the age of 30. And these grants tend to vary from 50% to 100% depending on the type of type of position, other identifiable traits, which can determine how much grant you might get for a specific individual. And now we're going to
just one quick thing on that. Sorry, the grant for the Canada Summer Jobs usually opens up in the winter, in December or so. So just keep that in mind that will be opened up soon. One thing I forgot to mention at the start is a lot of grants may be specific to a time period where the government cycle usually goes up to March, their fiscal year end. So a lot of grants may open up in the spring. So if you get in early, it's always better. And understanding which grants are available and how much capacity they have is a super important part of this process. Because sometimes we talk to people, they expect that there's going to be a ton of grants available throughout the year, which is not always the case. So knowing the deadlines, knowing when they open up, when they close, is a big part of this strategy, and specifically like creating a grant plan or strategy internally is huge, because knowing which ones to apply for at which time and how we're going to fund those costs, because a lot of these are based on a recovery basis, really is part of the budgeting process and planning process. And And I think that as long as, we're planning 6 months, a year in advance, which is, hard to do, but if you can think about it that far in advance, there's a ton of money. Like we said, um, every time I throw a big number at Arif, he looks at me like I'm crazy, which is consistent with how he looks at me every day. But we plan for it, and we reach that goal. So with intention, there's a lot that can happen. But if you're sort of looking at it after the fact, then you're not gonna be able to maximize on these.
Okay, alrighty. On to innovation. So as we mentioned at the start, this tends to be the big one, just because of our focus on innovation, research, and development. So SR&ED is obviously one that a lot of folks are aware of, and again, it's a big one. The other ones that are out there and sort of interconnected with SR&ED are NRC, IRAP, and FedDev. So NRC IRAP provides grants, again, that are geared towards innovation, research, development in the technology space. And the grants, they start at 50K. They can go into the millions. It really depends on the size of the business, what it's looking to do. As Shayan sort of talked about, the purpose of these grants is to put money back into the Canadian economy or build it further. So when you're going through this process, they're assessing, okay, where is this program going to take, not just the business, but how is it going to help Canada's economy or the local economy or whatever it is. And that drives a lot of decision making around these things. Similarly, FedDev is another, it's a grant/loan program, which again is geared towards, new technologies or the commercialization of products and, getting into global markets. So very similar focus, just different parties that are administering it. And again, they're looking at similar ideas, like how is this not just focused on the business, but looking at the bigger Canadian picture and how is this helping Canada as a whole. So a lot of grants, a lot of loans that are available in the SR&ED space. And not to be forgotten, the one of the biggest ones is the actual tax credits. So the SR&ED tax program, really amazing. And again, we're looking at this from a Canadian company's perspective. There are benefits that are also available to foreign companies that set up subsidiaries in Canada. But for Canadian-based businesses, you can claim, the salaries, the contractors. You also get a proxy amount for the overhead expenses, which is about 55% on salaries and 35% on contractors. And the federal credit that's available, the refundable amount, is 35% on the first $3 million of expenditures. So it's a pretty significant refund back into your pocket. It is a cash refund, so it's not a reduction of taxes, but money going back into the business to be reinvested. Sorry, Shayan, did you want to add something there?
What's a proxy?
What's a
No, I was
proxy?
going to say that you're a proxy, but
No, it's a good question. I think it's just meant to estimate what your overhead expenses would be, right? So you don't have to worry about tracking the overhead going into the SR&ED. You have to worry about tracking the labor and any contractors you might hire. But the government is allowing you this simplified method to claim your overhead expenses without tracking them. And so that could include any sort of overhead. The other important part to note here is that this is part of your corporate tax submission. So there are deadlines around this. Generally speaking, you want to try and get this filed, within your 6-month corporate tax filing deadline. The process is sort of a two-part process, one which involves, allocating costs, but then the second part, which is equally important, is also preparing technical analyses and reports to explain what you're trying, what innovation or what research are you doing. And so that's a huge part of getting that approval. And it goes back to the earlier example that Shayan gave about our client, and that's why we're able to get those kind of approvals. Alrighty, Shay, I'll let you dive in from here.
Okay, awesome. I may have cut out there, but I think we're okay now. All right. Yeah, I can jump in now. So the main thing I wanted to touch on when it comes to the difference between SR&ED and let's say the IRAP program is SR&ED is recovered expenses, whereas IRAP, you apply for it, you submit a project plan to the program and they approve it, and then you can go and spend the money. So there is a little bit of difference when it comes to how those programs are assessed and how you got to push through it. Another area that we can look at is how to get money from the government for startup work or for expansion. There's some really good programs out there, whether it's through just the general banking channels or through BDC. So when I say regular banking channels, I mean your normal big banks. The main program is the CSBFL, Canadian Small Business Financing Loan. That's a really interesting program because only 25% of that loan is personally guaranteed. So if you get a loan for $500K, you can use up to $350 for capital expenditures and $150 for cash flow. And only 25% of it is personally guaranteed. So essentially, you have $375 that is the BDC program, and that's pretty interesting too. There's various programs at BDC, and they all vary. There's startup programs, there's larger equipment financing programs. So you want to get in contact with the BDC rep, and they'll guide you through sort of what options there are. We know a bunch of them, so if you want any connects, let us know, and we can get you through them as well. All right, yeah, let's go on to the next topic, Arif. All right. So Arif, I'll throw this back to you since you're the tax master, and we can just touch on some updates for the capital gains exemptions and other tax optimizations that entrepreneurs should be aware of.
So yeah, I think there's a recognition of the fact that there's expected to be a lot of generational businesses that are going to be transferred, whether it's to family, to other business owners, or to new entrants, or whatever it might be. And so there is an effort from the government to try and facilitate that in a tax effective manner. So we've always had the lifetime capital gains exemption. They've bumped that up to 1.25 million. That was for any disposition after June 25th, and then it's going to go back to being indexed with inflation in 2026. So that number is going to continue increasing, and that means that when you're selling shares of a company, assuming it meets all the qualifications, you can shelter up to that amount of capital gains. A new incentive they introduced is the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive. So this is going to be phased in over the next 5 years, but effectively it's going to allow entrepreneurs, again, assuming you meet the conditions, about 2 million of capital gains as a result of this. And then finally, they sort of made some changes to something that was already in place, employee ownership trusts. And the purpose of this, again, is to allow for the transfer of business potentially from an owner to its employees who may be interested in taking it on. And the exemption there is on 10 million of the capital gains realized. And the last line is just some good books that cover a lot of different things. There's Traction's a big one. If you're into pricing, Never Split the Difference is great on negotiations. Shayan, anything your favorites?
Yeah, I think depending on the stage you're at, these are our favorite books, and we've been looking at Traction a lot for sales and marketing. Obviously, Alex Hermosi is a big name in that space. $100 million leads and $100 million offers is one of our favorites. And then just generally for entrepreneurs, Think and Grow Rich is a fantastic book that we should revisit often. So those are just some of our favorites. Nice takeaway, to end things off here. And if you want more details, we can send you a link. We'll put in the chat where we can send you a one-pager on some more specific grants and how to apply for them. Our team is a ton of experience in this space. We have a few dedicated staff who just focus on SR&ED and grants, and the benefits of these could be anywhere from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. We've got clients who are getting millions of dollars back a year with the R&D programs. So reach out to us and we can see if you're eligible, if there's any opportunities for you. So we're happy to discuss it with anyone and have a free consult and go over some options and see what the likelihood is for success. But yeah, we're always free. Thanks everyone for tuning in and checking out our content on this topic, and happy to connect with anyone. Shoot us a message on LinkedIn or feel free to email us. We're always happy to help out. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.